Joseph's dreams. Alright, so Joseph is Rebekah's daughter. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed. Rachel. Jacob had lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. These are the family records of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended to sheep with his brothers. The young man was working with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought a bad report about them to his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than his other sons, because Joseph was a son born to him in his old age, and he made a robe of many colors for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him, and could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. Then Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. There we were, binding sheaves of grain in the field. Suddenly my sheaf stood up, and your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." "Are you really going to reign over us?" his brother asked him. "Are you really going to rule us?" So they hated him even more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Look," he said, "I've had another dream, and this time the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." He told his fathers and brothers that his father rebuked him. "What kind of dream is this you've had?" he said. "Am I and your mother and your brothers really going to come down and bow to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Joseph sold into slavery. His brothers have gone to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. Israel said to Joseph, "Your brothers, are pasturing the flocks at Shechem. Get ready, I'm sending you to them." "I'm ready," Joseph replied. Then Israel said to him, "Go and see how your brothers and flocks are doing, and bring the word back to me." So he sent them from Hebron Valley and went to Shechem. A man found him there, wandering in the field, and asked him, "What are you looking for?" "I'm looking for my brothers," Joseph said. "Can you tell me where they're pasturing their flocks?" "They've moved on from here," the man said. I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.' So Joseph set out after his brothers and found them at Dothan. So they saw him in the distance, and before he had reached them, they plotted to kill him. They said to one another, "Oh, look, here comes that dream expert. So now come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. We can say that a vicious animal ate him, and then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to save him from them. He said, "Let's not take his life." Keep in mind, this is the oldest brother. Reuben also said to him, "Don't shed blood. Throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him," intending to rescue him from them and return them to his father. When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped off Joseph's robe, the robe of many colors that he had on. Then they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty, without water. So his brothers wanted to kill him, except for Reuben, who was like, "Hey, that's not a good idea." So he wanted to keep him alive so he could save him later. They sat down to eat a meal. When they looked up, there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were carrying aromatic gum, balsam, and resin, going down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What do we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come on, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him. For he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers agreed. When Midianite traders passed by, his brother pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy's gone. What am I going to do?" So they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a male goat, and dipped the robe in his blood. They sent the robe of many colors to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it. Is it your son's robe or not?" His father recognized it. "It is my son's robe," he said. "A vicious animal has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth around his waist, and mourned for his son for many days. And his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will go down to Sheol to my son mourning." And his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guards. So Israel's sons didn't like Joseph because he was the favorite. Tried to kill him, decided against it, sold him off to some Midianite traders. Midianites sold him to Egyptians. And then they took his robe and made it look like he got murdered for Israel. That's where we are. What a fun story. Judah and Tamar. Genesis 38. At that time, Judah left his brothers and settled near an Adullamite named Hira. There, Judah saw the daughter of a Canaanite named Shau. He took her as a wife and slept with her. She conceived and gave birth to a son, and he named him So this is Judah's kid? Yeah. She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. She gave birth to another son and named him Shelah. It was at Shezib that she gave birth to him. Alright, let's make a whole nother timeline for Judah. Not timeline, tree. So we have Judah. And Shao. And then they had Onan, and Shelah. So Onan, Shelah. Wow. A whole new line of friends. Just make sure you write Judah is on the back. Wow. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. And they love each other. Now Judah's firstborn, was evil in the Lord's sight, and the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, sleep with your brother's wife, perform your duty as her brother-in-law, and produce offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, so whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he released his semen on the ground, so he would not produce offspring for his brother. What he did was evil in the Lord's sight, so he put him to death also. So this guy is dead, this guy is dead. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up, for he thought he might die too, like his brother. So Tamar went to live in her father's house. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shau, died, and when Judah had finished mourning, he and his friend Hira the Adullamite went up to Timnah, to his sheep shearers. Tamar was told, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she took off her widow's clothes, veiled her face, and covered herself, and sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the way to Timnah. For she saw that though Shelah had grown up, she had not been given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, though, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. He went over to her and said, come, let me sleep with you, for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, what will you give me for sleeping with me? I will send you a young goat from my flock, he replied. But she said, only if you leave something with me until you send it. What should I give you, he asked. She answered, your signet ring, your cord, and the staff in your hand. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. She got up and left, and then removed her veil and put her widow's clothes back on. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite in order to get back the items he had left with the woman, he could not find her, and he asked them in the place, where is the cult prostitute that was beside the road of Enaim? There has been no cult prostitute here, they answered. So the Adullamite returned to Judah, saying, I couldn't find her, and besides, the men of the place said, there has not been a cult prostitute here. Judah replied, let her keep the items for herself, otherwise we will become a laughingstock. After all, I did send this young goat, but you couldn't find her. About 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar has been acting like a prostitute, and now she's pregnant. Bring her out, Judah said, and let her be burned to death. As she was being brought out, she sent her father-in-law the message, I am pregnant by the man whom these items belong. And she added, examine them. Whose signet ring, cord, and staff are these? Judah recognized them and said, she is more in the right than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah, and he did not know her intimately again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twins in her womb. And as she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand, and the midwife took it and tied a scarlet thread around it, announcing, this one came out first. But when he pulled his hand back, but when he pulled his hand out, gosh, I'm stumbling. But when he pulled his hand back, out came his brother. And she said, "What a breakout you have made for yourself." So he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, came out, and he was named Zerah. Wowee. So Judah's wife died. And then Judah and her, they had some kids. They had Perez, and they had Zerah. And Zerah had the scarlet thread. This is what we have. Joseph in Potiphar's house. Now Joseph had been taken to Egypt. An Egyptian named Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guards, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, serving in the household of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord had made everything he did successful, Joseph found favor with his master and became his personal attendant. Potiphar also put him in charge of his household and placed all that he owned under his authority. From the time that he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house because of Joseph. The Lord's blessing was on all that he owned, in his house and his fields. He left all that he owned under Joseph's authority. He did not concern himself with anything except the food that he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. After some time, his master's wife looked longingly at Joseph and said, "Sleep with me." But he refused. "Look," he said to his master's wife, "with me here my master does not concern himself with anything in his house, and he has put all that he owns under my authority. No one in his house is greater than I am. He has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. So how could I do this immense evil, and how could I sin against God?" So Joseph, who was sold by his brothers, is moving up the ranks in Egypt because God's blessing him, and then the Pharaoh's wife is trying to sleep with him. Wait, it is the Pharaoh's wife, right? It's not Potiphar. Let's make sure. I don't know. A wife. Although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her. Now one day he went into the house to do his work, and none of the household servants were there. She grabbed him by his garment and said, "Sleep with me." But leaving his garment in her hand, he escaped and ran outside. When she saw that he had left his garment with her and had run outside, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "my husband brought a Hebrew man to make fools of us. He came to me so he could sleep with me, and I screamed as loud as I could. When he heard me screaming for help, he left his garment beside me and ran outside." Hello.
Ignore me.
What's that?
Ignore me, I'm fine.
Okay. When his master heard the story his wife told him, "These are things that your slave did to me," he was furious, and he had him thrown into prison, where the king's prisoners were confined. So Joseph was there in prison.
I'm really gross.
You
but
could have
I'm
taken
laying down.
a beach towel.
I grabbed the first one I saw. Okay, you're good. You can read.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm just really tired.
Joseph in prison, but the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him. He granted him favor with the prison warden. The warden put all the prisoners who were in prison under Joseph's authority, and he was responsible for everything that was done there. The warden did not bother with anything under Joseph's authority because the Lord was with him, and the Lord made everything he did successful. So Joseph was wrongfully accused of an attempt at rape, and then he was put in prison, where he even climbed those ranks because God blessed him everywhere. Genesis chapter 40. Joseph interprets two prisoners' dreams. After this, the king of Egypt's cupbearer and baker offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them into custody in the house of the captain of the guards, in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guards assigned Joseph to them as their personal attendant, and they were in custody for some time. The king of Egypt's cupbearer and banker, who were confined in the prison, each had a dream. Both had a dream on the same night, and each dream had its own meaning. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw they looked distraught. So he asked Pharaoh's officers, who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "We had dreams," they said to him, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Don't interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told his dreams to Joseph. In my dream, there was a vine in front of me. On the vine, there were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, its blossoms came out, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup. And I placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. This is its interpretation, Joseph said to him. The 3 branches are 3 days. In just 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position. You will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand the way you used to when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well for you, remember that I was with you. Please show kindness to me by mentioning that to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison, for I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that they should put me in this dungeon. When the chief baker saw the interpretation was positive, he said to Joseph, I also had a dream. 3 baskets of white bread were on my head, and the top basket were all sorts of baked goods for the Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket in my head. This is its interpretation, Joseph replied. The baskets are 3 days. In just 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from off of you and hang you on a tree. Then the birds will eat the flesh from your body. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he gave a feast for all his servants. He elevated the chief cupbearer and the chief baker among his servants. Pharaoh restored the chief cupbearer to his position as a cupbearer, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But Pharaoh hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had explained to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph; he forgot him. Genesis chapter 41. At the end of 2 years, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing beside the Nile, when 7 healthy-looking, well-fed cows came up from the Nile and began to graze among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, silky and thin, came up. I'm sorry, sickly and thin.
Tiles, not cows.
Cows! After them, 7 other cows, sickly and thin. We're not going to Area 51.
Darn it! We need the cows to protect
No!
us.
7 other cows, sickly and thin, came up from the Nile and stood beside those cows along the bank of the Nile. The sickly, thin cows ate the healthy, well-fed cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep and dreamed a second time. 7 heads of grain, plump and good, came up on one stalk. After them, 7 heads of grain, thin and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 plump, full ones. And Pharaoh woke up, and it was only a dream. So even in the Egyptians' dreams, the east is still correlated with like bad stuff. Just never go to the east. When morning came, he was troubled. So he summoned all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, Today I remember my faults. Pharaoh was angry with his servants, and he put me and the chief baker, and the custody of the captain of the guards. He and I had dreams on the same night. Each dream had its own meaning. Now a young Hebrew, a slave of the captain of the guards, was with us there. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted our dreams for us, and each had its own interpretation. It turned out just the way he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged. Then Pharaoh sent for Joseph and quickly brought him from the dungeon. He shaved, changed his clothes, and went to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said about you that you can hear a dream and interpret it. I am not able to, Joseph answered Pharaoh. It is God who will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, In my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when 7 well-fed, healthy-looking cows came up from the Nile and grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, weak, very sickly and thin, came up. I have never seen such sickly ones as these in all the land of Egypt. Then the thin, sickly cows ate the first 7 well-fed cows. When they devoured them, you could not tell that they had devoured them. Their appearance was as bad as it had been before. Then I woke up. In my dream, I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, coming up on one stalk. After them, 7 heads of grain, withered and thin, and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up. The thin heads of grain swallowed the 7 good ones. I told this to the magicians, but no one can tell me what it means. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams mean the same thing. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads are 7 years. The dreams mean the same thing. The 7 thin and sickly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 worthless scorched heads of grain are 7 years of famine. It is just as I told Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt. After them, 7 years of famine will take place, and all the abundance in the land of Egypt will be forgotten. The famine will devastate the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered because of the famine that follows it. for the famine will be very severe. Since the dream was given twice to Pharaoh, it means that the matter has been determined by God, and he will carry it out soon. So now, let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this. Let him appoint overseers over the land, and take a fifth of the harvest of the land of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. Let them gather all the excess food during these good years that are coming. Under Pharaoh's authority, store the grain in the cities so they may preserve it as food. The food will be a reserve for the land during the 7 years of famine that will take place in the land of Egypt. Then the country will not be wiped out by the famine. So what happened here? What happened here is that Pharaoh heard that Joseph could interpret dreams through the power of God, and he interpreted his dream to predict what will be correctly that there's going to be 7 years of abundance and 7 years of famine, which allows the Pharaoh to prepare for this happening. Joseph exalted. The proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants, and he said to them, "Can we find anyone like this, a man who has God's spirit in him?" So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one as discerning and wise as you are. You will be over my house, and all my people will obey your commands. Only I, as king, will be greater than you." Pharaoh also said to Joseph, "See, I am placing you over all the land of Egypt." Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, clothed him with fine linen garments, and placed a gold chain around his neck. He had Joseph ride in his second chariot, and servants called out before him, "Make way!" So he placed him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and no one will be able to raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt without your permission." Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphenath-Paneah, and gave his wife...
That's the name.
Yeah, and gave his wife Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest at On, and Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. Wow. Joseph's administration. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph left Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced outstanding harvest. Joseph gathered all the excess food in the land of Egypt during the 7 years and put it in the cities. He put the food in every city from the fields around it. So Joseph stored up grain in such abundance, like the sand of the sea, that he stopped measuring it because it was beyond measure. 2 sons were born to Joseph before the years of famine arrived. Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest at On, bore them to him. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh and said, "God has made me forget all my hardships and my whole family." And that name means forget. And the second son he named Ephraim and said, "God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction." And Ephraim means fruitful. Got to have a new family tree here. So Joseph, and his wife Asenath, which is 100% pronounced correctly. I have no doubts. And he had 2 sons. So this is Joseph's line in Egypt. Then the 7 years of abundance in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in every land, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When the whole land of Egypt was stricken with famine, people cried out to Pharaoh for food. Pharaoh told all Egypt, "Go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you." Now the famine had spread across the whole region, so Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Every land came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain, for the famine was severe in every land. Joseph's brothers in Egypt, chapter 42. This is where it all comes together. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you keep looking at each other? Listen," he went on, "I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so we will live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he thought something might happen to him. Now keep in mind that Benjamin is both Jacob's youngest brother, and youngest son, and the only son of Rachel, which was his favorite wife. Other than Joseph, but he thinks Joseph's dead. The sons of Israel were among those who came to buy grain, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Joseph was in charge of the country. He sold grain to all its people. His brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces on the ground. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "From the land of Canaan to buy food," they replied. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Joseph remembered his dreams about them and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see weakness of the land." "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food," they said. "We are all sons of one man. We are honest, and your servants are not spies." "No," he said to them, "you have come to see the weakness of the land." But they replied, "We, your servants, were 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no longer living." Then Joseph said to them, "I have spoken. You are spies. This is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one from among you to get your brother. The rest of you will be imprisoned, so that your words can be tested to see if they are true. If they are not, then surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies." So Joseph imprisoned them together for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, "I fear God. Do this and you will live. If you are honest, let one of you be confined to the guardhouse, while the rest of you go and take a grain to relieve hunger of your household. Bring your youngest brother to me so that your words can be confirmed. Then you won't die." And they consented to this. And then they said to each other, "Obviously we're being punished for what we did to our brother. We saw his deep distress when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. That is why trouble has come to us." But Reuben replied, "Didn't I tell you not to harm the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must account for his blood." They did not realize that Joseph understood them, since there was an interpreter between them. He turned away from them and wept. When he turned back and spoke to them, he took Simeon from them and had him bound before their eyes. Joseph gave them orders to fill their containers with grain, return each man's silver to its sack, and give them provisions for their journey. The order was carried out. They loaded the grain on their donkeys and left there. The brothers returned home. At the place where they lodged for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey, when he saw his silver there at the top of his bag. He said to his brother, "My silver has been returned. It's here in my bag." Their hearts sank. Trembling, they turned to one another and said, "What is this that God has done to us?" So, you would think they'd be happy they had silver, but they're afraid because now it looks like they stole. When they reached their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them. "The man who is the lord of the country spoke harshly to us and accused us of spying on the country. But we told them, 'We are honest and not spies. We were 12 brothers, sons of the same father. One is no longer living, and the youngest is with our father, the land of Canaan.' The man who is the lord of the country said to us, 'This is how I will know if you are honest. Leave one brother with me. Take food to relieve the hunger of your households, and go. Bring back your youngest brother to me, and I will know that you are not spies, but honest men. I will then give your brother back to you, and you can trade in the country.' As they began emptying their sacks, there in each man's sacks was his bag of silver. When they and their father saw their bags of silver, they were afraid. Their father Jacob said to them, It's me that you make childless. Joseph is gone and Simeon is gone. Now you want to take Benjamin? Everything happens to me." Then Reuben said to his father, "You can kill my 2 sons if I don't bring him back to you. Put him in my care and I'll return him to you." And keep in mind, Reuben is the oldest brother and the one that was trying to protect Joseph earlier. But Jacob answered, "My son will not go down with you, for his brother is dead and he alone is left. If anything happens to him on your journey, you will bring my gray hairs down to Sheol in sorrow." Right. Chapter 43. Decision to return to Egypt. Now the famine in the land was severe. When they had used up the grain they had brought back from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go back and buy us a little food." But Judah said to him, "The man specifically warned us, 'You will not see me again unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go. For the man said to us, "You will not see me again unless your brother is with you."' "Why have you caused me so much trouble?" Israel asked. "Why did you tell the man that you had another brother?" They answered, "The man kept asking about us and our family. Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother?" And we answered him accordingly. How could we know that he would say, "Bring your brother here"? Then Judah said to his father Israel, "Send the boy with me. We will be on our way so that we may live and not die. Neither we, nor you, nor our dependents. I'll be responsible for him. You can hold me personally accountable. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, I will be guilty before you forever. If we have not delayed, we could have come back twice by now." Then their father Israel said to them, "If it must be so, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your packs and take them down to the man as a gift, a little balsam and a little honey, aromatic gum and resin, pistachios and almonds. Take twice as much silver with you. Return the silver that was returned to you in the tops of your bags. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also and go back at once to the man. May God Almighty cause the man to be merciful to you, so that he will release your brother and Benjamin to you. As for me, if I am deprived of my sons, then I am deprived." Return to Egypt. The men took this gift, double the amount of silver, and Benjamin. They immediately went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to his steward, "Take the men to my house, slaughter an animal and prepare it, for they will eat with me at noon." This man did as Joseph had said and brought them to Joseph's house. When the men were afraid because they were being taken to Joseph's house, they said, "We have been brought here because of the silver that was returned in our bags the first time. They intend to overpower us, seize us, and make us slaves, and take our donkeys." So they approached Joseph's steward and spoke to him at the doorway of the house. They said, "My lord, we really did come down here the first time only to buy food. When we came to the place where we lodged for the night and opened our bags of grain, each one's silver was at the top of his bag. It was the full amount of our silver, and we have brought it back with us. We have brought additional silver with us to buy food. We don't know who put our silver in the bags." Then the steward said, "May you be well. Don't be afraid. Your God and the God of your father must have put treasure in your bags. I received your silver." Then he brought Simeon out to them. The steward brought the men into Joseph's house, gave him water to wash their feet, and got feed for their donkeys. Since the men had heard that they were going to eat a meal there, they prepared a gift for Joseph's arrival at noon. When Joseph came home, they brought him the gift that they had carried into the house, and they bowed to the ground before him. He asked if they were well, and he said, "How is your elderly father that you told me about? Is he still alive?" And they answered, "Your servant our father is well. He is still alive." And they knelt low and paid homage to him. But when he looked up, he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and he asked, "Is this your youngest brother that you told me about?" Then he said, May God be gracious to you, my son." Joseph hurried out because he was overcome with emotion for his brother, and he was about to weep. He went into an inner room and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out, regaining his composure. He said, "Serve the meal." They served him by himself, his brothers by themselves, and the Egyptians who were eating with him by themselves, because Egyptians could not eat with Hebrews, since that is detestable to them. They were seated before him in order by age, from the firstborn to the youngest. The men looked at each other in astonishment. Portions were served to them from Joseph's table, and Benjamin's portion was 5 times larger than any of theirs. They drank and became drunk with Joseph. Chapter 44. Joseph's final test. Joseph commanded his steward, "Fill the men's bag with as much food as they can carry, and put each one's silver at the top of his bag. Put my cup, the silver one, at the top of the youngest one's bag, along with the silver for his grain." So he did as Joseph told him. At morning light, the men were sent off with their donkeys, and they had not gone very far from the city, when Joseph said to his steward, "Get up and pursue the men. When you overtake them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid evil for good? Isn't this the cup that my master drinks from and uses for divination? What you have done is wrong.'" When he overtook them, he said these words to them. They said to him, "Why does my lord say these things? Your servants could not possibly do such a thing. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the silver we found on the top of our bags. How could we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If it is found with one of us, your servants, he must die, and the rest of us will become my lord's slaves." The steward replied, "What you have said is right, but only the one who is found to have it will be my slave. The rest of you will be blameless." So each one quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. The steward searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes. Each one loaded his donkey and returned to the city. When Judah and his brothers reached Joseph's house, he was still there. They fell to the ground before him. "What is this you have done?" Joseph said. Didn't you know that a man like me could uncover the truth by divination? What can we say to my lord? What was that?
Tell me when you're done.
Okay. What can we say to my lord? Judah replied. How can we plead? How can we justify ourselves? God has exposed your servant's iniquity, and we are now my lord's slaves, but we and the one whose possession the cup was found. Then Joseph said, I swear that I will not do this. The man in whose possession the cup was found will be my slave. The rest of you can go in peace to your father. Remember that Israel said that if Benjamin isn't coming back, it's like the worst thing that could possibly happen. Judah's plea for Benjamin. But Judah approached him and said, My lord, please let your servant speak personally to my lord. Do not be angry with your servant, for you are like Pharaoh. My lord asked his servants, Do you have a father or brother? And we answered, My lord, we have an elderly father and a younger brother, the child of his old age. The boy's brother is dead, and he is the only one of his mother's sons left, and his father loves him. Then you said to your servants, Bring him to me so I can see him. But we said to the Lord, The boy cannot leave his father. If he were to leave, his father would die. Then you said to your servants, If your younger brother does not come down with you, you will not see me again. This is what happened when we went back to your servant my father. We reported to him the words of my lord, but our father said, Go again and buy us a little food. We told him we cannot go down unless your younger brother goes with us. If our younger brother isn't with us, we cannot see the man. Your servant my father said to us, You know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One is gone from me. I said he must have been torn to pieces, and I have never seen him again. If you also take this one from me, and anything happens to him, you will bring my gray hairs down to Sheol in sorrow. So what's happening here is really interesting. Israel doesn't want to be parted from his youngest son, but then Joseph wants him because that's his brother, right? That's his only blood brother, and he hasn't seen him in years. So if I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, his life is wrapped up with the boy's life. When he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. Then your servants will have brought the gray hairs of your servant, our father, down to Sheol in sorrow. Your servant became accountable to my father for the boy, saying, If I do not return him to you, I will always bear the guilt for sinning against you, my father. Now please, let your servant remain here as my lord's slave, in place of the boy. Let him go back with his brothers, for how can I go back to my father without the boy? I could not bear to see the grief that would overwhelm my father. Genesis chapter 45. Joseph reveals his identity. Joseph could no longer keep his composure in front of all his attendants, so he called out, Send everyone away from me. No one was with him when he revealed his identity to his brothers. But he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and also Pharaoh's household heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But they could not answer because they were terrified in his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, Please come near me. And they came near. I am Joseph, your brother, he said, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because God has sent me ahead of you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there will be 5 more years without plowing or harvesting. God sent me ahead of you to establish you as a remnant within the land and to keep you alive by great deliverance. Therefore it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler over the land of Egypt. So, like what happened with Isaac's son, and just all throughout what we've read so far, just because someone sins does not mean that can necessarily alter God's plans. He will find a way to make something happen if he wants it to happen. And that's what he's saying here. He was intended to go to Egypt the whole time. That doesn't mean it was right for his brothers to sell him. But in doing so, God used that as a tool to get the ultimate goal completed. Return quickly to my father and say to him, This is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me without delay. You can settle in the land of Goshen and be near me, you, your children, and your grandchildren, your flocks, your herds, and all you have. There I will sustain you, for there will be 5 more years of famine. Otherwise your household and everything you have will become destitute. Look, your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin can see that I'm the one speaking to you. Tell my father about all my glory in Egypt and about all you have seen, and bring my father here quickly. Then Joseph threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept, and Benjamin wept on his shoulder. Joseph kissed each one of his brothers as he wept, and afterwards his brothers talked with him. The return for Jacob. When news reached Pharaoh's place, Joseph's brothers have come. Pharaoh and his servants were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Tell your brothers, do this. Load your animals and go on back to the land of Canaan. Get your father and your families and come back to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat from the richness of the land." You're also commanded to tell them, "Do this. Take wagons from the land of Egypt for your dependents and your wives, and bring your father here. Do not be concerned about your belongings, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours." The sons of Israel did this. Joseph gave them wagons as Pharaoh had commanded, and he gave them provisions for the journey. He gave each of the brothers changes of clothes, but he gave Benjamin 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of clothes. He sent his father the following: 10 donkeys carrying the best products of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys carrying grain, food, and provisions for his father on the journey. So Joseph sent his brothers on their way, and as they were leaving, he said to them, "Do not argue on the way." So they went up from Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. They said, "Joseph is still alive, and he is ruler over the land of Egypt." Jacob was stunned, for he did not believe them. But when they told Jacob all that Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport them, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. Then Israel said, "Enough, my son Joseph is still alive. I will go see him before I die." Jacob leaves for Egypt. Israel set out with all that he had, and came to Beersheba, and he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. That night God spoke to Israel in a vision. "Jacob, Jacob," he said. And Jacob replied, "Here I am." God said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you back. Joseph will close your eyes when you die." Jacob left Beersheba. The sons of Israel took their father Jacob in the wagons Pharaoh had sent to carry him, along with their dependents and their wives. They also took their cattle and possessions they had acquired in the land of Canaan. Then Jacob and all his offspring came with him to Egypt. His son, grandsons, his daughters and granddaughters, indeed all his offspring, were brought with him to Egypt. Jacob's family. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt. Jacob and his sons: Jacob's firstborn Reuben. Reuben's sons: Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. Simeon's sons: Jemuel, Jemin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of the Canaanite woman. Levi's sons: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Judah's sons: Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah, but and Onan had died in the land of Canaan. The sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul. Issachar's sons: Tola, Pavu, and Jashub, and Shimron. Zebulun's sons: Sered, Elon, and Jahleel. And these were the sons of Leah's sons, born to Jacob and Padam Aram, as well as his daughter Dinah. The total number of persons, 33. Gad's sons: Ziphion, Haggai, Shunai, Ezbon, Eri, Arodi, and Areli. Asher's sons: Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, Beriah, and their sister Sarah. Beriah's sons were Heber and Machil. These were the sons of Zilpah, whom Laban gave his daughter Leah, that she bore to Jacob, 16 persons. The sons of Jacob's wife Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. Manasseh and Ephraim were born to Joseph in the land of Egypt. They were born to him by Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, a priest at On. Benjamin's sons: Bela, Besher, Ashbel, Gera, and Naaman. Ahai, Rosh, Muppim, Huppim, and Ard. These were Rachel's sons, who were born to Jacob, 14 persons. Dan's sons: Husham. Naphtali's sons: Jaziel, Guni, Jezer, and Shillem. These were the sons of Bilhah, whom Laban gave his daughter Rachel. She bore Jacob 7 persons. The total number of persons belonging to Jacob, his direct descendants, not including the wives of Jacob's sons, who came to Egypt, was 66. Wow. And Joseph's sons, who were born to him in Egypt, 2 persons. All those of Jacob's households came to Egypt, 70 persons. Jacob arrives in Egypt. Now Jacob had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to prepare for his arrival at Goshen. When they came to the land of Goshen, Jacob hitched the horses to his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. Joseph presented himself to him and threw his arms around him and wept for a long time. Then Israel said to Joseph, "I'm ready to die now because I have seen your face and you are still alive." Then Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's family, "I will go up and inform Pharaoh, telling him my brothers and my father's family who are in the land of Canaan have come to me. The men are shepherds, and they also raise livestock. They have brought their flocks and herds and all they have. When Pharaoh addresses you and asks, 'What is your occupation?' you are to say, 'Your servants, both we and our fathers, have raised livestock from our youth until now.' Then you will be allowed to settle in the land of Goshen, since all shepherds are detestable to Egyptians." Chapter 47. Almost done. Pharaoh welcomes Jacob. So Joseph went and informed Pharaoh, "My father and my brothers, with the flocks and herds and all that they have, and all that they own, have come from the land of Canaan and are now in the land of Goshen." He took 5 of his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh asked his brothers, "What is your occupation?" They said to Pharaoh, "Your servants, both we and our fathers, are shepherds." And they said to Pharaoh, "We have come to stay in the land for a while because there is no grazing land for your servants' sheep, since the famine in the land of Canaan has been severe. So now, please let your servants settle in the land of Goshen." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Now that your father and brothers have come to you, the land of Egypt is open before you. Settle your father and brothers in the best part of the land. They can live in the land of Goshen. If you know any capable men among them, put them in charge of my livestock." Joseph then brought his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many years have you lived?" Jacob said to Pharaoh, "My pilgrimage has lasted 130 years. My years have been few and hard, and they have not reached the years of my fathers during their pilgrimages." So Jacob blessed Pharaoh and departed from Pharaoh's presence. Then Joseph settled his father and brothers in the land of Egypt and gave them property in the best part of the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's family with food for their dependents. The land becomes Pharaoh's. But there was no food in the entire region, for the famine was very severe. The land of Egypt and the land of Canaan were exhausted by the famine. Joseph collected all the silver to be found in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan in exchange for the grain they were purchasing, and he brought the silver to Pharaoh's palace. When the silver from the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan was gone, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us food. Why should we die here in front of you? The silver is gone." But Joseph said, "Give me your livestock. Since the silver is gone, I will give you food in exchange for your livestock." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and he gave them food in exchange for the horses, the flocks of the sheep, and the herds of cattle, and the donkeys. That year he provided them with food in exchange for all their livestock. When that year is over, they came the next year and said to him, "We cannot hide from our Lord that the silver is gone, that our livestock belongs to the Lord. There is nothing left for our Lord except for bodies in our land. Why should we die here in front of you, both us and our land? Buy us and our land in exchange for food. Then we with our land will become Pharaoh's slaves. Give us seed so that we can live and not die, so that this land will not become desolate." In this way, Joseph acquired all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh, because every Egyptian sold his field, since the famine was so severe for them. The land became Pharaoh's, and Joseph moved the people to the cities from one end of Egypt to the other. The only land he did not acquire belonged to the priests, for they had allowance from Pharaoh, and they ate from their allowance that Pharaoh gave them, therefore they did not sell their land. Joseph said to the people, "Understand today that I have acquired you and your land for Pharaoh. Here is seed for you, sow it in the land. At harvest you are to give 1/5 of it to Pharaoh, and 4/5 will be yours as seed for the field and for food for yourselves and your households and your dependents. You have saved our lives," they said. "We have found favor with our Lord and will be Pharaoh's slaves." So Joseph made it a law, still in effect today in the land of Egypt, that 1/5 of the produce belongs to Pharaoh. Only the priest's land does not belong to Pharaoh. Israel settles in Goshen. Israel settled in the land of Egypt in the region of Goshen. They acquired property in it and became fruitful and very numerous. Now Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, and his lifespan was 147 years. When the time approached for him to die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "If I had found favor with you, put your hand under my thigh, and promise me that you will deal with me in kindness and faithfulness. Do not bury me in Egypt. When I rest with my fathers, carry me away from Egypt and bury me in their burial place." Joseph answered, I will do what you have asked. And Jacob said, swear to me. So Joseph swore to him. Then Israel bowed in thanks at the head of his bed. Wow. So Joseph, being in control of the food distribution, he basically monopolized Egypt and the government as a whole to own all of Egypt, all the people in all the land, except for the priests and their land. And he promised Jacob, who's also called Israel, that he will bury him where, I'm assuming where Abraham died, right? Yeah, with my fathers, to carry me in the burial place. So he's going to put him in the same place that everyone else has been buried.